All right. Okay, thank you. Good evening. As they say in New York City, hot enough for you? Somehow it seems appropriate talking tonight about solar energy that we're in yet another one of these long, hot summers. First of all, thank you all for coming. Megati, my district liaison, Megati Derbagosian. She and I were, pardon the pun, sweating whether we could do this without air conditioning. And so hopefully it will cool down, and we have fans, and so we're trying to keep everything cool tonight. So again, thank you for coming. I'm now at 7 months since I took office in December. How time flies. I guess that's just for longevity. Last night, the City Council adopted the budget, our annual budget. Anyone know how much the total budget, operating and capital, is for the city of Pasadena? $1.5 billion. $1 billion for our operating, to pay for our parks, our libraries, our police, our fire, also our water and power, our buses, on and on. And then about almost $500,000 of capital investment this year. I'm not particularly happy with the budget, but I voted for it because in the process of working through the budget, I was able to make a number of points that we actually adopted as part of the budget, looking ahead to next year. Looking ahead so that we have some running room. You know, the budget was pretty much done when I took office, and so I didn't have much impact on it. But one of the things that I consistently emphasized as we talked to each department is the idea of performance measures. And those of you who are in private business probably take that for granted. Almost every business sets goals, not just how much money you want to make, but how many widgets you want to sell, or how many branches you want to open, or there are performance measures that help you track how well you're doing. Are there any teachers in the audience? Okay. You know, one of the things that's controversial is standardized testing, right? Many teachers point out that those tests don't always measure some important things, like love of learning. But would we ever go back to the days where when you went to a new community and said, how are the schools? And the answer was, well, my cousin went there a couple years ago and it seemed pretty good, right? We expect and we hold accountable, at least our public schools, to actually be teaching our kids to read and write and do arithmetic at grade level. That's the expectation. And while testing is an imperfect way of figuring out how well our schools are doing, it's better than nothing. We have performance measures for every department in Pasadena, and they suck. And it's not because effort wasn't made some time ago to do them, but there wasn't the follow through and the utilizing of those to really make them useful. So I won't go into much more, but I just want to make this point. You deserve to know how well that $1 billion is producing results. And yes, when we walk out and say the streets swept and the trees are trimmed, and if I call 911, they come in 30 seconds, that's how we typically measure how well Pasadena is doing. But for $1 billion, we need to have some more. Let me just give you one as an example. It's standardized. It's called the Pavement Management Index. And over the years, it's been refined and refined. And now there are computer-aided cameras that will drive up every street in a community and produce the quality of the paving, right? Whether it has potholes, whether it has cracks, whether it's impervious. Scale of 0 to 100. Pasadena's in the high 60s. That's a D. We really ought to be in the 80s. And a reason, even if you don't ever drive and don't care at all about potholes in the street, we should be fixing our streets because it costs a lot more not to fix them. When you let cracks develop, when you let potholes develop, it's way more expensive to fix them than to come every couple of years and preventively maintain them. So every time you see a pothole, it's not only costing you when you bump over it, whether you're on a bike or in a car, but it's also costing you in the long run. So it really wasn't until I took office on the council we even began paying attention to the Pavement Management Index. And people really were shocked to find that Pasadena, which has high standards. So I'm really hopeful that we'll begin to measure our libraries, our parks, our police, our fire, and begin to really push them to demonstrate that we're getting our money's worth. So that's an impact I hope to have. So let's talk about why you all came here tonight. This is my monthly District 2 issue forum, the third Tuesday of every single month here, and this was a test. We'll see if we'll cross our fingers about whether we're going to do this in July and August. We may want to find an air-conditioned venue. But third Tuesday of every month. And the topic tonight is solar. Now, there are two kinds of solar. How do I move the computer? Do I have a, oh, here it is. There are two kinds of solar. I'm sure there's more, but there's two basic kinds of solar. One is utility grade solar, and the other is local solar or rooftop solar. So utility grade solar might be a giant array of solar panels out in the desert somewhere, right? With dozens of megawatts of output. And then there's the solar on your roof. Primarily tonight, we're going to be talking about solar on your roof. Your home roof, your apartment building roof, your church roof, your library roof, parking structure, canopies, Caltech, schools, etc. That's what we're going to be talking about tonight, and we'll talk about why we're going to be focusing on that. And we're going to talk about it at two levels. We're going to talk about the city and how we encourage as much solar and battery as possible. But also, what about you? How many have solar now? How many do not have solar now? All right, well, you're actually leaning a little bit more towards solar than the typical audience, right? And so part of tonight will be for you to listen and learn, is this for me? Is this something I want to do? And also for us to hear from you, what would it take for you to invest in solar so that we can be a more resilient community? So just a word about Pasadena Water and Power, 120 years old. In Altadena, they were at the mercy of Southern California Edison, and that didn't work out particularly well. We have had our own power company for over 100 years. And it's a big business. 311 million of that $1.5 billion is just the electric. Doesn't count the water, just the electric, $300 million. And by the way, we made $75 million last year in profit. Now, we don't have shareholders, so you get that money back. It doesn't go away. But because of the high cost of electricity, it actually triggered higher rates. We will not make anywhere near that this year. But that gives us some cushion for future investment. The City Council 2 years ago, when my predecessor was in office, passed Resolution 9977 at the urging of Pasadena 100. And you saw the table for Pasadena 100, which is a grassroots group of citizens who are concerned about climate change and wanted our city to move to 100% renewable energy. And the City Council agreed unanimously in 2023. And since that time, we have been working to figure out how do we get there, because that's actually a very ambitious goal. And one of the key elements that came out of what's called the optimized strategic plan is we need a lot of rooftop solar in our community. And so that's what we'll be talking about primarily tonight. Again, from the standpoint of the policy citywide, but also how it applies to you and your home or your apartment building or your church, what have you.
So I have a question.
Yes.
The flyer that I got from Al, that got my interest is really good. I like that.
Yes.
So what's the Utah coal plant situation?
Yes.
I saw a 40% number there.
Sure.
It looked like a lot of power to have to replace.
Great question. Do you all hear it? Because I'll repeat it. No. In the flyer, I mentioned that today, 40% of our electric power is generated by a coal plant in Utah. That's a long-term, I think, David, that's a 30-year contract?
It was, and it expires in 2027.
So in 2 years, it goes away, but that plant is converting to natural gas. And so unless we have enough renewables to replace that, we are reliant on natural gas. And that's what we'll be talking about tonight, is how do we wean ourselves off of natural gas. One of the things about renewables that people say, oh, isn't that expensive? And we'll talk about those realities. But with war in the Middle East, gas prices, petroleum prices, natural gas prices are literally going through the roof right today. So it's not like renewable, I mean, once you install solar, that's the cost. So it's really important to think about what's affordable, not just at any given moment, but also the volatility of gas supplies in the world. So this is just a quick snapshot. This is from the annual report of your Light and Power Fund. 140,000 customers. We have customers beyond the city of Pasadena. We actually have some Altadenians who get their electricity from us. Not very many. How many is that, David?
It's small, but a lot more on the water side.
Yeah.
About 3,000 on the water side.
And 661 miles of basic wires. And 11,000 poles, for example. Pasadena's been pretty aggressive. We all pay a utility undergrounding. So you go on most of the major streets, you don't see the electric lines you see in most cities. That's been undergrounded over the years. But most of our residential neighborhoods still have the above ground electric wires. And we're gonna be talking about megawatts. That's 1,000 watts. And we'll talk a lot about megawatts. I'm sorry, 1 million megawatts. Megawatts. 1 million watts. And so the highest we've ever had, or at least in 2024, the highest was 320 megawatts. We'll be talking about solar today as we need 100 additional megawatts, approximately. So to give you a sense, again, to the question earlier about how do we replace the power that that's expiring. And so let's get started. Let me introduce our panel. Cynthia Kennedy is an attorney, longtime resident, and is the president of Pasadena 100. I described that earlier as a grassroots community organization that grew up around the goal of getting us to 100% renewable, and Cynthia has been leading that grassroots effort over the last several years. The new head of our Pasadena Water and Power Department is David Reyes, who was previously Assistant City Manager, and before that he was our Planning Director. And when our last Pasadena Water and Power Director left, David filled in, and he did such a great job. He is now the permanent general manager of our Water and Power Department. And Vic Aguilar is a local solar provider. His passion is renewable energy. He's been in this field for many years. This is not a commercial for his company, but it is a commercial for his expertise that he's going to share with us, not only about the solar business, but about some of the practicalities, some of the challenges of solar for putting it on your rooftop. What are the challenges? What are the pluses and minuses? So with that, let me begin with the first question to David. How would you describe the challenges and the opportunities for rooftop solar at this stage, recognizing that we're in the midst of figuring all of this out?
Thank you, Councilmember Cole. Thank you for inviting me here. This mic is on. I can't tell. Okay, good. Great. No, it's not on. Great. How about that? Yeah.
Make it, he said, put it right next to your mouth.
Perfect. It's a good start. So
That's Pasadena water, by the way.
it's award-winning water. We have about 3,000 residential solar customers right now in Pasadena, and they produce about 30 megawatts total currently. That's what we have, and we've been tracking that since about 2005. So it's been, on average, we see, anywhere from 150. One year we had up to 500 new solar installations. I was quite impressed to see the number of folks in this room that have solar roofs. The city of Pasadena currently has a program in the municipal code. It's what we call net energy metering, that allows basically you to offset, a residential property owner, or commercial for that matter, to offset all or a portion of their electric bill every month. And those 3,000 customers that we have that have solar installations, I would say that the vast majority, probably over 75%, actually get up to 90% of their bills paid for, their electric use. And so the opportunity in terms of incentives do exist. I think that what Councilmember Cole described earlier in terms of having to try to produce 100 megawatts of solar in the city is ambitious. It's a challenge. The 3,000, as I said, the 3,000 solar installations that we have, they produce about 30 megawatts. And that's taken, nearly 20 years to get there. So the opportunity in terms of incentives for residential property owners and commercial property owners certainly exists. Councilmember Cole also talked about the opportunity for what we call municipal or utility scale solar. And so we'll be releasing some RFPs in the coming months to look at 5 municipal buildings, 2 fire stations, 2 other buildings, and we have a proposed new Sunset Reservoir project that has a very large roof structure. And so we'd like to have those all have solar, but we also need battery. So solar without a battery, as we all know, and we're lucky to be in Southern California with all the sunshine that we have. But solar at night, right, it doesn't exist. So what we really need is solar with batteries. So I think the opportunity in terms of the existing programs and policies on the residential and commercial side for the regular rooftop, it does exist. I know that Vic has some expertise and can talk more about the contracting process, and we've been working hard to change our permitting process to streamline it. And so to make it easier, to make it faster, so that the average homeowner can actually see that happen without having to rely on a specialized liaison that can work with the city. We're working, Councilmember Cole is also on the Municipal Services Committee, which is a committee that is helping to shape the optimized strategic plan and pave a path forward. So we're going to be working with the MSC, Municipal Services Committee, in the coming months to come up with some additional policies around solar. And Councilmember Cole talked about our budget. It is a large budget. We're the largest department in the city. In terms, we've got about 415, 430 employees. I was very proud of them during the fire and what they were able to accomplish, both on the power and the water side. We are reasonably priced in terms of rates, and I don't want to ramble, so I cut me off, Councilor Cole, but let me just get back very quick to the opportunity, because I'm sure we're going to talk about other things, and I'll share more. But I think the opportunity is going to be something that we're going to need all the citizens to help us with. It really is, and I think P100 has done a great job of getting the word out. I think everybody cares about the climate. That's not an issue. It's not a question of values. Sometimes it's an issue of money. So in our budget, we've got about $3.85 million that we've allocated towards a brand new program where we want to help folks that are income qualified and help them get rooftop solar as well. And we need to do more on the incentive side so that folks, right now there's no incentive to install batteries. And so that's going to be up to us to help figure out that incentive and what that looks like to do that. So hopefully that answers at least
That's a good start.
The question, sir. Thank you.
Cynthia, how did rooftop solar become such a centerpiece of the strategy for the city around getting to that goal of 100% renewable by the year 2030?
Well, I think actually it was the city experts who developed portfolios, models that this is a consulting firm called E3, Energy, Environment, and Economics. We've been working, I say community members and PWP especially, have been working with them for more than a year now to try to develop a plan for success so we can actually get to this 100% carbon free. And they went through all kinds of models. What they came up with was really 4 possible ways of going about this, and to simplify, local solar is critical. We won't do it without local solar. And what we know is, as David said, we have about 30 megawatts now. We're going to need to get to about 130. And also another piece of the recipe, I like to think of this as sort of a recipe, it's storage. So we need to get to 125 megawatts of storage. Now, consultants, they can't predict the future, but they do a pretty good job of pointing you in a direction. The council, the Municipal Services Committee of the council, actually said, yes, let's go ahead, let's do this. So that's kind of where we are right now. And the solar piece, the local part of it became so important when we realized, and I guess experts have known this, but we as community started learning about how the system actually works. We actually can't keep getting everything we need from outside, importing electricity from developers in remote locations, because we have a kind of bottleneck that limits how much we can get in to the city. So David's team has been doing a great job of increasing the amount of imported electricity in renewables, but we're gonna have to do the local part, which means covering our rooftops, city buildings, institutional buildings like Caltech and Pasadena City College, Huntington, all these places are gonna need to have solar. Which is beneficial to them. I mean, it's good. It's wonderful for your electric bill. And then we need residential and commercial as well. So the way it came about was the experts told us, if you want to get to this result, here's the path. So now where we are is we've got to try to actually plot out the path with a real practical, specific plan with timelines, and then we all got to move forward with it. I mean, it's really exciting, because we can do it.
Do you know how many of those 3,000 businesses or homes may already have battery connected? Do you have a way of knowing that?
I don't have that number. I know that it's a very small number. It's a very small number. I could probably get that and provide it. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, the question was, of the 3,000 installations, how many of those actually have batteries associated with them? And it's a real small percentage. I don't have the exact number, but we can provide that to Councilmember Colesley.
At our home, we have both. And the advantage, which proved terrific during the emergency, was we never lost power. Pasadena was fortunate to largely be able to keep the lights on, but there were some outages in parts of the city. And as a result of that, with our batteries connected up to the solar, the lights never flickered at our house. And as we look at, the potential for future disasters, things like earthquakes. The ability to have that kind of resilience is something to keep in mind when you're thinking about whether you want to have solar. It's not just an economic question, but it's also making sure that everything in the refrigerator stays on when or stays cold when the lights go out. Cynthia, another question, which is, what do you see as needed to both protect existing and to augment incentives so that people out here in the audience who are thinking about solar to make that decision easier for them, both solar and batteries?
Well, first of all, I think we need to make sure we keep the incentives we have. You may be familiar with what's happened in the for-profit utility companies in California. Unfortunately, they eliminated net energy metering in its practically useful form, and the solar industry and the number of installations has dropped dramatically.
You may want to explain a little bit more about net energy metering. I think folks in the business understand that, but it's basically what David was saying about selling back your electricity to the utility, and Cynthia's very familiar with it. So if you could break down how that works.
So I'll use my own house as an example, and many of us benefit from it today. Net energy metering, one, is the system we have in Pasadena, and it's great. People don't really know much about it, but it is a fantastic incentive. So in my house, we make more electricity than we use. Of course, our rooftop solar system is making it possible for us not to be a drain on the system. We are actually not drawing down very much from the local distribution grid at all. But we make more, and we get a credit for that. So at the end of the year, because my husband actually insisted that we cover every single place on the roof with solar panels, because of that, we really don't have a utility bill. We also charge our cars, which is fantastic. We both have electric cars, so it's a real economic advantage to us. The downside, of course, or it's not a downside, the reality is we have to make a big fat investment. So it's not free, you have to pay. It's basically members of the public, like many of you and like me, we're fronting the cost of supplying the electricity and the demand reduction benefit to the grid. So it's known. If you look at places like Australia, where Australia is just marching ahead tremendously, and just in like a few years, they've quadrupled the amount of rooftop solar. And there was one time period where they increased it 10 times in the space of about 3 years, I think, because they've got strong incentives and they have commitment.
Well, then the first thing
Let's, if we just have everybody just talk, that won't work. So if you have a question, fill out one of these cards. We'll have opportunities for questions at the end as well. But if during the panel, if you want to ask a question, just fill out one of these cards. Maggie will pass you one, and then I'll feed it in, and then we'll have opportunity at the end for any additional questions.
I was wondering if I could just pause a minute just a little.
Yes, thank you.
And it's clear that, so Cynthia is part of our technical advisory panel, which is a group of citizens that's working with myself and staff and our consultant to come up with a plan. We're very thankful, and she's obviously very knowledgeable in the field. One of the things that we've looked at in terms of that net energy metering system, the existing program that we have in place today, the ordinance that the council adopted about 15, 20 years ago, and I'm not joking, it is probably the best in the country in terms of incentives. And so we may need to make some changes in the future. We can't make changes that won't incentivize, right? So we recognize that there needs to be an incentive. If you make that upfront investment that Cynthia was talking about, there needs to be a way that you get that return on investment. What we found in Pasadena is that it's about 8 years. In most other places, it's 15 to 20. And so it's a very good system for the residents, and as Cynthia said, maybe it's the best kept secret in town, I don't know. But we are looking at, rest of the world is on NEM 3.0. What our code talked about was when you have about 5% of the city's usage or load on solar, then it could be, you can change it, you can do whatever you need to do. And we're at about 9% right now, which is not bad. So, you know, we had some outages last year. There was about 3 or 4 days of consecutive 108-degree weather, if you might recall. And so we had some outages, and the peak there was about 330 megawatts in terms of demand. And so we've got, again, typically it's about 300, and so what we have is the 30 megawatts we've talked about. So we're doing okay. We need to do better. And any changes that we make, we do know that there still needs to be incentives for the homeowner or the business that wants to install solar. Thank you.
So Vic, this is going to be a little bit of the glass is half empty and the glass is half full, right? We all would like to see more folks find it useful, profitable, and desirable to install solar and battery. But there are challenges with that, and you deal with those challenges every day. You want people to sign up, but you also know that that there are challenges. So what's the reality for folks in the audience who are thinking about investing in solar? What's the reality of how long does it take? Are there ways to spread out the costs? What are the hangups? You mind sharing?
Absolutely. From my own perspective, and I've been doing this here on 20 years, I think it might be a little bit different than like a mainstream, I guess. I've always been a bit of an iconoclast, and turns out that I've been right in a lot of ways, made the right decisions, including my career choice. And first off, I wanted to just kind of put some context to everything that we're talking about and what David and the folks at PWP do, actually. He didn't mention it, but they're actually part of, and their crew operate the most complex, complicated machine on Earth. That is a fact. And the requirements in terms of providing that power are incredibly rigorous. We're talking utterly life and death. It's phenomenally serious business. And the power generation industry comes from a tradition of deep conservatism for a reason. And what we're going to be talking about tonight in a lot of ways is a whole paradigmatic change in how we manage the grid, from a financial perspective, but also from an engineering perspective. And so it's a big lift. As we're currently doing things, it's going to be impossible. The way we connect solar right now, the kind of solar we connect, will be utterly unmanageable. Fortunately, there are very simple changes that we can make. And I prioritize, like when we're making purchases with our company or decisions, the easiest ones are cash flow neutral or negligible cash flow. And then we look for what we call SOAPFOs. And those are stroke of a pen, flick of a switch. And that's part of the stuff. There's a lot of these kind of things that we're going to need to do if we're going to really meet this objective from an engineering point of view. Not going to get off into the weeds about it, but we immediately need to transition to grid forming inverters only. All solar must be grid forming, and that's something that, again, and that's a total SOAP at no cost to the city. That's the other thing about the rooftop solar. What we're talking about is what's called behind the meter, because all that power that you're generating on your roof, you're generally consuming in your home, so it's never actually seen by the utility. Nobody has any visibility as to what's happening behind the meter. But for the grid to operate efficiently, it's critical that all these resources are orchestrated to an extremely high degree. So we need resources that are what are called firm and dispatchable. And it's not just generation, it's also load. So we need to be able to control our loads, we need to be able to control the generation, we need to be able to orchestrate it all. And the beauty of rooftop, and what we're talking about today, is if we do it smart, it's the ultimate soap thing. So it's a cash flow neutral thing to utility. It's something that can be done incrementally, and the same tools that make it absolutely possible give the grid resiliency where it's almost impossible for it to fail. So resiliency, like a centralized hub and spoke model that the utilities are traditionally used to operating under, completely out the window. You're talking about something far, far, far more resilient.
And that actually, Vic, feeds right into a question we had. Our system's inverter failed, and when we were shopping around for a new one, we considered upgrading our panels. One vendor said we wouldn't be able to increase our solar because we're not allowed to exceed the energy of our average consumption. Is that accurate? And if so, will that be changing? And so that is accurate. We have a rule that you can only install enough solar for your house and your use. But that doesn't take into account that you might buy an electric vehicle next year and then your use would go up. It might be that you want to contribute to our overall goal. So David, will that be changing?
So it would take the city council to, it's in our ordinance that the purpose of the existing system is to offset your usage, right? And so it's not to produce more than your usage. So that's the current system. There are many ordinances and regulations that other utilities have that allow more. So just real clear, what we do at PWP is we basically look at last year's usage, right? And then we say, okay, this is how much energy you use, so this is the size of solar system that you can install so that it offsets. As Councilmember Cole stated, folks are going EV, folks are building ADUs, and so it's often the case that you're going to use more electricity than you did the previous year. And so many cities do have regulations and policies that allow greater than 100%. Again, the intent is not to allow or provide a venue for residents to make money off of the grid. Because in that case, like if you think about, we're talking about energy usage and prices and what you're paying on a monthly bill, but the transmission lines, all of the substructure, it is complicated. It is expensive. We have an old system, as Councilmember Cole talked about, being around for 100 years. We have a very reliable system, one of the most reliable around, and we constantly win awards. I walked into that, I inherited that, I didn't create that, but those are just facts. The MSC, the Municipal Services Committee that we talked about earlier, they have provided some direction to staff to look at changes, and one of those areas was considering what would it look like, how could we change it to allow folks to have greater than 100% of their annual usage. I will say the current policy, if you get an EV and you show us like, hey, I got an EV, we allow an additional amount right off the bat. We do that. If you say I have a building permit for an ADU, we allow greater than 100%. That's the current rule. That's the current policy in place.
I can tell you that one member of the MSC from District 2 has been pretty vocal about eliminating this rule. But what it illustrates, and David has put his finger on a key issue that Vic just addressed, and I want you to go in some more detail on this, Vic, which is the way we've done business for 100 years will not work going forward. And it is very difficult to change. Someone once said that the only people that like change are babies with wet diapers. Because we had twins, we had 3 children in diapers at the same time, and I can tell you that even babies that have wet diapers don't always like having those diapers changed. So it's almost universal that we are. So for 100 years, we have been selling you all of your electricity. You couldn't make electricity on your own until the advent of solar. We were the monopoly supplier. And so our whole business was making sure that we gave you the power you needed at the price you could afford and make sure the lights stayed on as much as possible. That was our business model. But as Vic has said, from a technical standpoint and also from a financial standpoint, we actually have to change because now you are a mini power plant. Now you are producing and selling electricity to us. And we have to put it on the grid that was designed to go this way, and now it's going to go this way. So it's a big challenge. So Vic, besides the engineering challenge, which you talked about, we can be on the road to fixing. What about the financial challenge to the utility? They're going from being sellers of electricity, now they're buyers of electricity.
Super challenging, and I think actually if there's any takeaway from this evening, I would just like to say how much I think it's really injustice and unfairness to David and the entirety of the Pasadena Water and Power to be put in this position where just to be able to provide a reliable resource and to take care of their families, they have to be literally on the wrong side of history, which is exactly what's happening right now. Fortunately, this is not in a vacuum, and these kind of issues have been seen all over the world, just like the technical issues about running the grid on renewables. And this is all put under a category of expertise that's called, it's a weird, performance-based regulation. And what performance-based regulation is it's about realigning the incentive landscape of utilities where it lines up the same with the ratepayers, including moving toward a distributed, largely behind the meter or with a large component of behind the meter generation included in the mix. So this performance-based regulation, and Google it, talk to other people about it, we need to really start to gather momentum behind it, and that's going to be the basis that we're going to be able to actually rejigger the rules and the incentives so we're all rowing in the same direction at the same time. So that's really key. It's not going to happen without that.
We want to talk a little bit more about policy issues, but I do want to come back and drill down. What is it for you, right? If you tonight said, yeah, I'm interested, I want to talk a little bit about the how this works and how we can make it work better. But before we do that, the city's over 30% renters, or 50% renters. It's actually almost 60. How do we coax landlords to grant permission to solar battery installation? What financial assistance, if any, is available to renters and, for that matter, landlords?
So that's, to me, there's also a council member from District 2 on MSC that's been pushing this issue quite a bit. And we currently don't have any. If you're a property owner of an apartment building and you're collecting rent from your tenants, and they're paying the electricity bill and the water bill and sewer, trash, whatever, not a whole lot of incentive for that property owner to install solar. There just isn't. And typically, we don't see a lot of rooftop solar on multifamily apartment buildings that are for rent.
Just a MASH or SASH, that money doesn't come to POUs, or there's a program in the state called multifamily affordable solar housing. It's been around for years.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we there's a state on everybody's bill in this room. Actually, I think in California, no matter what utility you belong to, there is a sort of a public surcharge that the state requires that we have no discretion over, and then a portion comes back to the city. And then we are, as I think Councilmember Cole indicated at the outset, we are a non-profit, publicly owned utility. And what that means is all that money that we collect, that the state collects and then gives a portion back, we put into programs. And we have a whole bunch of programs that exist in the city. We have programs that allow, the conversion of energy efficiency appliances. And what we're trying to do, and what I mentioned a little while ago is, at the outset, we are developing new programs. This $3.85 million is the first time we put into our budget that the council did approve. That's meant to help initially income qualified folks, but we would like to expand that. We do have money, and it's a matter of allocating where that money goes and into which programs. And so I do think that the issue of multifamily, as Councilmember Cole mentioned, 60% of our residents are renters. They're not all in apartments. Some are in single-family homes. But the reality is that we need to probably develop programs around our multifamily apartment buildings. And by programs, I mean incentives to make it worthwhile for the property owner to actually install solar. And so those are programs that I think that the city council is going to see in probably Q2 of this year as we develop those, as we work through the optimized strategic plan. We need to start coming with an implementation plan, and that means new programs. And so those are things that we are looking at and things that we'll be bringing forward through MSC and then on to city council for approval so that we can implement them.
Cynthia.
So if I could also mention community solar, public solar, you've heard about this, I'm sure many of you have. You'll see these projects all around the country. There's some states that are really leading, like Minnesota, I think Michigan, a few other states have been real leaders in this. California, not so much, but Pasadena 100 has made a proposal that's a really nice proposal, well thought out, a lot of information. It may not be exactly right, but it's a proposal that addresses the need for multifamily housing and for public solar. And the way this works is Pasadena Water and Power, the city, would actually reach out to private property owners. This could be commercial buildings, it could be apartment buildings, and would seek to enter into a lease agreement to use their rooftop. This is done commonly in the United States and other places. And in exchange, the developer or the private property owner gets a reduction on their utility bill, and Pasadena Water and Power in the city would use that rooftop for solar. And then you have to hopefully require, or you hope, probably require in most jurisdictions, that the landlord passes on some of that utility rate discount to the tenants. So that's one model that has been used. I know there's a project right now in La Puente that's, I think, almost completely realized. I don't know if you know about it, but this is the model they're using. So that's one way of approaching the issue.
You've got mail. You've got mail.
So let's shift, and we'll come back a little bit to the bigger picture of policy, but let's shift again to something that's practical for those of you who came curious about whether solar might be for you, and of course batteries as well. Vic, walk us through, as an installer, you sit down with a homeowner or a business, and what are the analysis that they need to do to figure out whether solar makes sense? Then what are the steps? And then as you move through those steps, where are the opportunities for improvement?
Got it. Well, I think the first thing, is to, I guess, recognize within yourself why you're interested. Be it everybody thinks, well, lots of people think that it's just a purely pure-eyed economic kind of equation, but that may not necessarily be the case. And it also depends on what your objectives are for the property. I do overwhelmingly residential, and most of the stuff I do is in our immediate area. I'm lucky, it's purely on a referral basis. So most of the people that I deal with, I'll ask them, how long are you going to be in the home? Because it's a very important consideration about the strategy that you're going to take in terms of whether you're gonna do it or not, what kind of system, battery or not to battery, etc. So most of the people that I work with are gonna be in the home for fairly long duration. I have lots of them that will point to a specific spot in the backyard that they'll insist they're gonna be buried in. So that's the first thing, you know, do you own the home? How long are you gonna be in it? And then looking at the usage, what I'm able to do, if you're not in Pasadena, is I'm able to digitally get what's called hourly interval data. Because let's say you're in Altadena or one of the surrounding cities, there's energy is charged at different prices at different times of the day. For Pasadena, we're not currently able to,
But we're on that road.
and I'm not sure if it's AMI, there's something called Utility API. There's literally thousands of utilities that we're able to actually get the data from, and it's hourly interval data, so we get a whole 2 years of data every single hour. Anyway, so the important thing is that the usage is a big part of the exercise. The main part of the exercise is what's called right sizing. And that kind of goes back to what we were talking about, whether it's 100% of your historical usage or otherwise.
And that, I'm going to interrupt you for a second. I have an old house with a gas stove and a water heater and a furnace. Should I replace all this electric appliance in order for solar to be useful to me?
You may or may not want to. It depends on the age of the appliances. It depends on how much your resources you allocated for the project. There are significant incentives for replacing a lot of these combustion-based fossil fuel burning appliances with heat pumps and other apparatus that are vastly more efficient and also give you the potential of being completely self-sufficient by running your home on electricity. So that's another great thing about electrification. Given an appropriately sized array, given enough storage, you can not only provide enough power for your home, for all your lights, for all your other needs, air conditioning and otherwise, but also to power your transportation. So,
And as studies have shown, cleaner indoor air for you to breathe as well.
oh, vastly cleaner, yeah. So you're completely eliminating number one cause of all kinds of indoor pollution driven things like asthma, hypertension. Actually, the existence of gas-fired appliances comes with a whole host of health side effects from an air quality perspective that
So
you may not be aware of.
So let me put you back on track. So you've sat down with the homeowner at their kitchen table and you've gone over their usage and you have a sense of how long they're going to be there. What's the next step?
Yeah, so, you know, we're taking into consideration whether they would be increasing their usage in real obvious ways, like do they have EVs or not? If they aren't ready to go the full heat pump route, I can do the calcs to figure out what it would typically cost to run a heat pump from a kilowatt hour basis. So we can actually build that in, and that's part of the exercise of
And for those
right-sizing.
Those who are not familiar with heat pumps, you know, I live in a brand new 1.5-year-old ADU. We put in heat pumps. Heat pump replaces your heating and your air cooling. And it uses electricity and water basically to heat your home and cool your home. And I love it because just click on and room by room, I can put it to the exact temperature I want, whether it's hot or cold.
Yep, and it gets even better than that. Like if you do a heat pump hot water heater, guess what the exhaust gas, guess what the effluent of that heat pump water heater is? Cold air. So you put it in your garage, and you literally are getting free air conditioning in your garage while using that energy to heat your water. I mean, it's just incredible. It seems like insane that you wouldn't do it any other way.
So you're sitting down and now you know what their demand is. What about, what's the next step to figuring out, contract and financing and all of that?
But we're also the other really important consideration is the infrastructure. And when I talk infrastructure, there's two parts of that. It's kind of the roof, and then also the electrical infrastructure, like the main electrical panel, that kind of stuff. So typically, the average system that we're installing nowadays requires at least 150 amp service. Most households are interested, or a lot of them already have, upgraded to 200 amps. There are electronic ways now that have just been approved that allow us to connect stuff without upgrading your service panel, but that involves compromises. So that's something that may come up. If you've got a super antiquated circuit breaker panel from the 20s, chances are that's going to need to be replaced as part of the exercise of going solar. There's also the roof itself. So the systems that we install are guaranteed for 25 years, including the roof penetrations. So we're looking for a roof that also has a similar kind of lifespan. Now the thing is that once you install the solar, if a roof, let's say it's a 30-year roof and it's been up there 10 or 15 years and it doesn't leak and it's in very good shape, when we put the solar on it, it's kind of like the effect of putting the couch, I call it the dorm room effect, where they never move the couch and so it's a different color than the rest, you know what I mean? It doesn't fade. That kind of happens with your roof, the area around the array itself. It's a big judgment call as to whether or not it makes more sense to potentially remove the system after 10 or 15 years and have a re-roof done, or have the re-roof included as part of the scope of the project. And doing roofs is really a big ticket item. Solar and batteries are also a fairly large capital investment. So when you start looking at the electrical infrastructure, when you start looking at replacing roofs, and you start talking obviously about the solar equipment, I mean, the whole thing becomes a pretty daunting financial endeavor if you have to do all three of them at once.
Vic, I talked to another contractor in town on it. They had some challenges with our insurance requirements and some other things that we worked on. But he had indicated that an average 2.5, 3-bedroom home in Pasadena, it was going to be about $40,000 for a very good system that would potentially include a battery. Now, that's like sort of a range, but that's kind of what I have heard. I actually live in the San Fernando Valley in Northridge, so I don't know. I have LAWP, unfortunately. But is that kind of what you're, and I know it's hard to say average, but.
Yeah, it really, there's not a lot average.
Yeah.
When it comes to people's energy use, even when you're in an area of tract homes and you've got the exact same square footage, people can really have dramatically different ways of using energy. And then they also use energy in very different ways as they progress through life. And that's the thing, that's one of the very important considerations. I mean, for me personally, for the people that I work with, when we're not in Pasadena, we're always recommending a system that's going to offset anywhere from 140 to 160% of their historical usage. That's their prior usage. And the reason being is, first off, in my experience, in almost 20 years in this industry, almost everybody who goes solar tends to use more energy straight off the bat. It's just a thing about, something about generating your own power. And then the other thing about it, and I've got great graphs that I can share with you guys. I'll be here to answer questions at the end of the show, and I've got a list of, leave an email, and I'll email you some of the information on things that I've talked about if you're interested. Anyway, yeah, so we've got the temperature increase. The consistent increase in temperature at our latitude. And I've got a fantastic graph by McGregor, I forget what's his
Edgar?
Edgar McGregor, yeah, showing the trajectory of temperatures in Pasadena. So if you're looking at last year's data, you're looking obviously down the graph and using that as a reference point. Well, you're going to be living in the house up here, right? And then the other part of it is the reality is that as we get older, we tend to become less tolerant of extreme temperatures. So we want to use more AC and more heat pump. So that's the other thing that we're factoring for. So hence, it's not oversizing. It's called right-sizing. And I can tell you that from our perspective, our business is 100% on referral. The people who we're able to do this for are the ones who are the happiest. They're the people that are giving us all the 5-star reviews that we've got.
So when you've gone through that calculation, when you've figured out what the price is going to be in total for that particular user, what are the options for paying for it? Obviously, you can write a check, you can borrow the money, and where do the incentives play into this?
Got it. Most of the incentives, like the stuff that you used to get from the utilities that you might have heard of from years ago, are long, long gone. So all that money's gone. There is some cash that's available from the state for the batteries. It's called SGIP or SGIP. That's a cash incentive that's based on the size of the battery. Other than that, the big incentive, and currently, as we're looking at things, it's going to be eliminated at the end of this year. The big incentive is the 30% investment tax credit. And that is an actual credit, so it's not a cash rebate. It's not a discount off the top of the cost of the system. What it is it's a credit that you apply against your next year's tax liability. So whatever you owe in taxes, they're like magic dollars. They erase them. And the beauty of the tax credit for solar, as it was designed, is that unlike the vehicle, it's not use it or lose it. So if you don't have enough tax liability to use all that credit the first year, it will continue to roll over until it's exhausted. So that's pretty much it. You're going to get a cash rebate for the battery, and then there's also the 30% tax credit. Now, in terms of paying for the system, obviously there's the cash option. Second very popular option is HELOCs. Home equity line of credit. The thing about a home equity line of credit is you can deduct the interest of your HELOC from your taxes. I'm not giving you tax advice, but that's my understanding, okay? And the thing about a HELOC is that there's no crazy origination fees. I haven't done specialty solar financing for years. That's the great thing of having my own shop. I set the rules. I don't believe in it. I think it's usurial. We just heard about a failure today, Mosaic, one of the specialty solar lenders, and they've always been available. If you talk to the big box retailers, they're going to offer you one of these solar loans, and there's something called dealer fees. That can be 20, 25, or even 30% of the value of your system if they add on top of the value of the financing. If you want to read horror stories, do solar dealer fees, and you're just going to see tons of complaints all the way up to today. So solar lending is not so great, but HELOC is great. Another great thing is if you're a member of a credit union, if you're teach, if you're law enforcement, firefighter, whatever, they often have specialty loans for home improvement or specifically for solar and batteries. And also potentially a bank that you have an established relationship with. You can do a home improvement loan and you're not going to get ripped off. You're not going to get these ridiculous dealer fees.
May I add a
And-
little bit?
Yeah, and what we just got a question which is directly related. Is the city and Pasadena Water and Power thinking of offering our own low-interest solar loans to customers? And
Yeah, that,
and will rebate checks be reintroduced?
yeah, so rebate checks, I don't know. We currently provide our checks in the form of credits to our customers that produce a surplus of energy through our existing policies. But the program that I talked about, the 3.85 million, is, and the reason that we decided to start with income qualified folks is because they have a hard time getting a traditional loan. Banks, don't often want to deal with them, and so what we're looking to do is create the backing for it, and so that it would be a low or basically a no interest loan that we would basically partner with banks. We would be the backers so that they're not worried about a default, and that folks could install the solar systems, and then it just sort of gets paid back over time through the credit of the solar system. And that's the approach that we're trying to do. It's a pilot program. We're really excited about it. I'm hoping that we can get it off the ground. As I said, the council has approved the $3.85 million so that we can get that program going, and we're really excited about it.
Cynthia?
Yeah, several things come to mind. One is on the program, this is a wonderful idea, this idea of Pasadena actually supporting low interest or zero interest loans, but it really needs to be also for middle income people. One of the things I hear so often from people talking in Pasadena is, I would like to have rooftop solar, but boy, that's the price of a car. And it is the price of a car, that's what it is. But if we extended that to the middle income residents of Pasadena, it would make a lot of sense and it would help people. I wanted to say something about batteries. The problem with requiring residential customers to also install batteries or incentivizing them to do it or requiring them to do it as a condition of this loan program, which is, I think, the current plan, or is it not? I'm not sure. This increases the cost dramatically. I'm not sure what the current cost of a battery is, but it's another whole big chunk. So one of the things that's great about what PWP has been considering doing is actually doing centralized batteries. So there's a 25 megawatt project that's planned right now, and I think budgeted, you have another 100 megawatts for a centralized battery, meaning something at Glenarm.
That's correct.
This is actually a whole lot more manageable, and it means that residences don't have to do it. Kind of in line with what Vic is saying, a lot of the beauty of the way we're heading with distributed generation is the ability to use kind of, software algorithms, grid management systems that we didn't have before to rationalize the way electricity is shared and stored. And frankly, I think PWP can do this better if at least a good chunk of their storage is something that's centrally handled. And it means you don't have to buy your own batteries. Someday batteries will be cheap. It might come soon, but it's not right now. Another thing I wanted to say about batteries is, thank goodness, even though the current federal administration is doing away with everything they can possibly think of that helps with clean energy, last I heard, as of today, the bill, the big beautiful bill, as they say, still has in it direct pay provisions for nonprofits. David,
Correct.
you probably are following this a lot closer than I am. But what that means is the city can actually, as a nonprofit, qualify for a direct payment. This is the beauty of the Biden bill. I mean, it's the most amazing thing. The city can actually get reimbursed for clean energy investments like batteries or any number of things, rooftop solar on schools, libraries. And we need to grab that before it's gone. So that's one thing. And then finally, one other money comment. I think we have to realize electricity, the cost of electricity is going to keep going up. So it's not just that solar is smart now, it's that solar is smart for the future. And you look at places like Hawaii, if you ever go to Honolulu and drive around neighborhoods, you see solar panels everywhere. Because what happened in Hawaii is the cost of electricity just kept going up and kept going up. And people were smart and they said, we're gonna invest now and we're gonna have rooftop solar. So we have to think about the future.
Hold on. One more point, and then we're going to go to direct questions. Three of you asked various, or made comments or asked questions all about efficiency, right? We've been talking all of this forum about electric generation, but several of you said, well, what about reducing our demand, making energy more efficient in homes? And there are lots of programs that are possible to do that. And whether you do it, or whether the city does it, or whether a nonprofit does it, weather stripping, duct sealing, we have a lot of older homes in our city, switching to more efficient appliances, et cetera. That's a separate topic. It's an important topic. We hear you, but we're focused tonight primarily on the solar. And then lastly,
Can I just comment on that?
if you'd like.
Really good data on this kind of stuff, and actually Pasadena is kind of a poster child of a community where it doesn't really pencil out that well. The reason is the kind of housing stock that we have, the age of the housing stock that we have, doesn't readily lend itself to much in the way of energy and efficiency improvements. The houses are just designed during a different era with no mechanical ventilation, so the way we build houses nowadays are almost the complete opposite of the kind of houses that we have. So, yeah, so just, there's only so much you can do from an efficiency point of view. It's actually cheaper just to add another couple of panels than.
Okay, we'll come back to the panel for some last words, but go ahead, and then this right here and then here.
I'd like to quickly share my story. I think it might be helpful to others, and I can also use some guidance from the panel and from you. I had solar panels installed on my roof in 2023. The company, I had researched them. They were sponsored by Nike, by Costco. They seemed reputable. They damaged my roof. They didn't do their due diligence. My house is over 100 years old, and it should not have been approved. I've been trying for 2 years. I've had to hire an attorney, and I've spent my life savings, tens of thousands of dollars, fighting this solar company who has delayed, distracted, ignored. They have not shown up for arbitration. My trial date is over a year away, and we haven't even begun the case, and I'm already probably $30,000 to $40,000 in debt for the attorney's fees. How can we protect our citizens from this kind of predatory behavior? I don't know if...
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Any of the panelists want to tackle that?
That's terrible.
Vic, you want to start?
That's
You have
terrible.
the company. It's
Yeah.
horrible, and
Yeah.
I'm disheartened. I'm really sorry.
Is there anything we can do as the city of Pasadena or as a council?
Yeah, one of the things that we're looking to do to help residents, and this doesn't necessarily help you, but it's sort of prospective going forward, is to develop a list of qualified contractors.
Yes.
And that's important. It really is, and because homeowners, you're sort of at the mercy of the folks that you're dealing with. The reality is of these companies going belly up is so hard to deal with, and I don't have a good answer for you. It's real challenging. Sounds like this gentleman to my right has been doing this for 30 years. Maybe you can share some of his.
Go ahead, Vic.
Yeah, 100%, sympathetic to your situation. It's terrible. It's terrible for any of us in the industry that, this is my life's work. I mean, I tell people this is as close as you get to a calling without a special caller, and we do mom's rule. We treat everybody like they're my family. So I can even imagine what it's like for you to deal with people with those kind of values. It saddens me, and it's a reflection on our whole industry. And unfortunately, I'm afraid that we're going to be hearing more and more of these stories with what's going on right now in rooftops, solar writ large. There's some
Because of the loss of incentives in the private utility, many companies have struggled financially. They staffed up, and now they have to staff down.
California does have very rigorous home improvement laws that relate to home improvement and protections for homeowners. And there's a lot of litigatory pathways. Of course, this stuff takes forever, and of course, you got to self-finance it until you finally see the end of it. You just I can't even imagine.
Okay, thank you. I'm not talking as a vendor. I sure don't, I can talk for that microphone if that's okay.
Yes, but can we be brief?
I will be very brief.
Okay.
Just I'm saying why I'm here,
Ah,
okay? My wife almost lost her horse at Eaton Camp. Okay?
I think you could use the microphone.
Okay, my wife almost lost her horse at Eaton Camp. Her school burned to the ground. She was at 86. Okay? So I wanted to find out how I could help Pasadena. She went to a protest on Saturday late in Colorado, I believe is where it was. What I can do is try to help guide people through the energy source, because that's what I do. It's called grid construction. Don't worry about the company. If you had a mini bike like you did when I was little, they made the motor. What I can do is offer advice to help. Your $40,000 quote is out of bed. That's way high. On the average, you should see $800 to $1,000 a kilowatt hour installed.
That's right.
Okay? Secondly, if you look at California-based companies, there's an additional 20% rebate on battery storage available. Yes, it is.
Okay, well, we have a difference of opinion.
So, I can answer the question.
No.
Yeah, my question was, how can I help? I'm not trying to sell you stuff. I just would like to be part or help the city that I now live in. I didn't grow up in North Carolina. I mean, in California. This is a North Carolina accent, but I want to help. Just like my wife's trying to help in a way.
Okay. Yeah.
That's right.
Well, I think you've helped by coming tonight. The purpose of these issue forums is when I knocked on doors during the campaign, I found people who were deeply thoughtful, very caring about their community, and knew almost nothing about their city government, right? And the issues that we're facing. So part of this is just to be a more educated community, and for us to be able not only to make individual decisions about avoiding catastrophe and being smart about lower utility bills, but also how we as a community can be a model for other communities, especially in an era of climate disasters. We've just encountered a horrific one, and unfortunately more may be in the offing. So how do we climate-proof as much as possible our community? And that's sort of, we all need to work together, and there are different roles. Some people are doing research with Pasadena 100. That's incredibly powerful because knowledge is power. Some people are simply speaking out. We have a student here. You're a sophomore in high school?
Yeah, I'll be a junior next year.
Yes. She is going to be a junior. She's been speaking at the city council for 2 years.
In high school, not college.
Yeah, in high school, yes. Her name is Audrey Ma, and she's one of my heroes. She's our Greta Thunberg. And so there are a lot of ways in which you can participate, including figuring out whether solar is for you at this time. And so that's part of what we're all doing. Other questions, and then we'll begin to wrap up. Yes.
And this is a question for David. Having installed a number of solar systems myself, City Water and Power has steadily, over the years, raise the disconnect, reconnection fee for services. This applies if you're putting in a new electrical panel, or if you just hook up solar to do it, and the contractor had to have the power disconnected, because contractors are required to have the city individual disconnect, you'll up the pole. And the contractor will do that. But the reconnection, well, the most recent job I worked on just 2 months ago, it's $1,100 fee for that. And when I called city's water and power to ask why it was so high, this goes back to you, Greg. City council voted for that increase. Now, several years ago, it was only $400, and that was because I had to do that in my own house, where I had a defective panel part that said we had to turn off the power and get it reconnected. Anyway, that's my question for us, David, if we can see a little help from these folks trying to do something.
Yeah, I would never give an answer because city council did something that doesn't make a lot of sense. I think I heard that our reconnect fees have gone up sort of astronomically in the last couple of years. I think that's the question and sort of what's going on. They typically go up with just CPI. Like that's what has been standard over the last 5 years, and I think
Consumer price index.
with inflation, and I think it was 3.1% this year. That's across the board for city fees in general. But last year I think it was closer to 7% inflation, and that was sort of. I think that's
So let's make that part of kind of our analysis.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
2 more, 3 more, and then we'll wind up.
I guess.
Thanks very much. I know you talked briefly about NEM 1.0 and NEM 3.0. I'm just curious, I really worry that NEM 3.0 might take effect, or an iteration of that, and we'll move away from 1.0. And I think solar savings, a lot of solar savings would be lost going to 3.0 or an iteration of that. Can you speak further as to what you envision as to the next version of NEM in the city?
And again, a reminder, that's net energy metering. That's the price you get when you sell your electricity back to the utility. And again, we are different from the private utilities. The Public Utility Commission governs private utilities. We get to set our own rules. David?
Thank you. And one of the things that I think Vic talked about was in other cities going and sort of right-sizing where it's maybe 160% of historical usage. In those cities, they don't have the same deal that we have. The incentives are much less. And so they're buying back electricity at like a wholesale rate, basically for a much cheaper rate. So we are one of the last cities to have 1.0 existing. I do think that we're probably need to make some changes. We've talked about the volatile market. We've talked about the changing utility world in general. And I think that we're right in the middle of it. We're somewhere in the middle of this change, but I think the change is going to be dramatic. I don't know where we're going to be to honest with you. We've got a lot more research to do, but the research shows that every other city, probably across the country, is beyond the 1.0. What I started out at the beginning, and Councilmember Cole talked about, is the great need for local generation and the great need for local solar. And we talked about maybe 100 megawatts. We only have 30 now. There is no way that we're going to get anywhere close to the 100 if we don't have the right incentives.
That's right.
So that's true. But I don't know. If it's
And
1.0
we as a
or
community get to make that decision.
That's right. And ultimately, it's city council's choice. Staff gets to make recommendations, and we try to present sort of put our best recommendation forward based on facts. At the end of the day, that's a great policy question. But we all know that if we do want solar, and we do, then we have to have incentives in place.
Mark?
Mark May, just before my question, quick bit of advice to somebody considering this. As an architect, the most important thing you're going to do when you put solar on is to protect your waterproofing in your house. People get into trouble because they hire the best solar company that is, unlike Mr. Aguilar Vic, are not good at roofing or don't care about it. And that's where it turns into a mess. So that's my piece of advice, take care of the roof. My question is, and you touched on this, but it seems that a very important part of this, getting to the 100 megawatts of capacity, is these large commercial roofs. And it doesn't seem like we have a very viable plan to even begin exploring how to bring them. You know, why is Home Depot, why is the Paseo, why don't they have solar?
Yeah. I'll start just by saying that of the 30 megawatts that we have, 40% of that is from commercial, not residential. But it's a small number. It's a very small number of we've got 2,900 residential and only 120 commercial. To your point, it's very few in the city, and I think that one of the things that we need to do better is to, and we have folks that handle what we call key accounts, our large users. And I think we need to do a better job of reaching out to them and working with them, sharing what the incentives look like. At the end of the day, a lot of these institutions would probably benefit, would help the city meet some of our goals, and I think it would help them as well. So I think that it's an education piece and something that we need to work on.
My question relates to new construction. Are solar panels required, and if so, how is use calculated?
It's calculated based on, if it's new construction, if they were inhabited, then it's going to be based on what it's called conditioned floor area, or CFA. And that's a huge bone of contention for us right now, because the calculus that they use is absurdly low. It's ridiculously low. We're talking 2 watts per conditioned floor area per cubic foot. So you turn out, and I work on a lot of custom homes, new construction, 7,000, 8,000 square foot homes, and they're only able to put on 12 or 14 kilowatts. They probably need twice as much. So my recommendation is not to install the solar for the new construction until you've been able to establish a baseline of a couple of months of consumption. You run the meter up like crazy, and they will interpret it. And that's seriously what we're doing. This is the kind of stuff that we have to do in this town just to get a decent sized system. But that's the only way you're going to be allowed to do what you need to.
So there is no requirement?
There is a
Well, there is a
requirement.
requirement.
There's a statewide requirement some years ago. So I'm going to ask each of the panelists for final thoughts. And then if we want to stick around and you want to ask the panelists any additional questions or get a business card or join Pasadena 100, we would love to connect you up with 3 wonderful experts. So Cynthia, let's start with you. What are your final thoughts for this audience who came here to learn more about solar? Some are strong supporters, some have it, and some are also wondering, is this a good idea for us and for our community?
Well, just a detail or some facts that I wanted to add, and then I'll say something more global. The consultants who've studied this for us in Pasadena identified actually 60 megawatts that are available on publicly owned buildings. So that's one thing we can do, and I think PWP is sort of looking into this. We actually have a lot of space, and this is a no-brainer. I mean, we should be covering our city-owned buildings with solar. And that is something we should be starting right away. Just on a more big picture, we have a chance to do something fantastic as a city. We really do. And when you look at greenhouse gas emissions that are causing the climate crisis that we face, fully 20% of greenhouse gas emissions in the United States come from electric power production. If we can do this here, and there are other cities trying, I mean, LA has actually got a goal of 2035. Glendale has a 2035 goal, Sacramento has a 2030 goal. These are all publicly owned utilities like ours. So if we can do this, we are potentially doing a really great thing in terms of the future of our children. It also happens to make a lot of sense economically for us to do rooftop solar on our homes. Once we get the actual infrastructure in place, the sun is free. I mean, there's maintenance costs, but unless you have a catastrophe like this person here had, it's a great way to assure resilience and resources for yourself and your family for many decades. So
Dick?
that's my thought.
Final thoughts?
Yeah, I think, talking about the specifics of this conversation, rooftop solar, solar in general in Pasadena. Pasadena is a bit of a closed garden, and what may seem like a limitation is actually a tremendous opportunity for turning this city into a laboratory for running a modern grid with cheaper, more reliable, low to zero carbon energy. And it's totally doable if we think creatively, and that's going to include things like the performance-based regulation. That's going to include things like mandating grid-forming inverters for all new interconnections. That's also going to be things like creating a much more dynamic, orchestrated grid where we're actually able to fully utilize our resources. And what we're going to find is that by orchestrating it, not only are we going to make it more resilient, but we can do it far cheaper than before. Because the way we run grids nowadays is with a 40 to 60% margin, a safety margin. And what other grids in other parts of the world are finding is that you in no way, shape, or form need to operate your grid with that kind of buffer if you just run it smart. So there's a lot of low-hanging fruit in terms of how we manage this challenge, and the important thing is that we've got to be all pulling our rows together at the same time.
Let's give the last word to the person who is carrying the most responsibility on our behalf, the head of Water and Power.
Thank you, Council Member. It is exciting opportunity time for us in the utility. We're leaders in Pasadena. And I don't know if you know it, but we are about 86% carbon-free in terms of electricity. We have our own power generation in Glen Arm. That is not clean. We try to run that as little as possible, but it's very important for that immediate dispatchable energy for reliability. Solar is great. Without a grid to make sure that you have that electricity coming to you, there's no sun for a day, there's no sun for a couple of hours. What do you do at night? There needs to be a system in place to ensure that our residents have electricity, and that's part of the challenge. But we have a great opportunity, I think, with our residents' help and support. Next Thursday, there's some flyers out in front. I would encourage everyone to grab one. We're having an open house, a PWP open house. We have about 7 tables. We encourage everyone to come out. You can ask us questions about anything. We can speak to you about anything in the utility, from the customer service aspect to electricity to water, everything that we do. It's at Victory Park, and I would hope everyone would come out. We are a publicly owned, not-for-profit, municipal-owned utility. It's yours. It's not ours. All of the money that Councilmember Cole talked about in the beginning in terms of the revenue generation and what we charge and where the money goes, it goes back into the system. It gets put right back into the system. And so I think that we have some great opportunities to make some real changes in the future, and we're really excited about that. And I just want to thank everybody for coming out.
I want to do the same, and let's give the panel a hand. And that goes for you for coming out and being in this warm weather. I just want to take one more minute to introduce a good friend of mine and congratulate her. Lena Kennedy, who's sitting in the back, was appointed last night by the City Council to a new committee. It's a committee to study how much City Council members in Pasadena should be paid. It's the council, it's the Council Compensation Committee. We face an extremely difficult problem that may not be solvable. And that is that it takes more time to be on the City Council than you can do with a regular job. And yet we don't want full-time politicians. So how do we balance the challenge of making it possible for people to run for city council and to serve successfully without turning it into a full-time professional political class? And that is a very difficult balance in Pasadena. And so 8-member committee has been appointed. Lena's been appointed by the council member in her district. I appointed Steve Olivas, who just left the planning commission to represent our district. And they're going to grapple. So pay attention to that. I am leaving my job. I have a day job. I'm leaving my job July 11th because I knew running for office I would not be able to do a more than full-time job supervising 175 people in the city of Los Angeles and do this job and do both of them well. So I'm retiring, and I'll be teaching part-time, but I'm going to devote most of my attention. But I have that luxury. And we don't want to make being on the city council just for people who are rich or retired. We want people to be able to serve, and that's a really difficult challenge. So pay attention to this issue because it's going to be coming up. Right now, council members are paid just a little over $20,000 a year, and the mayor's paid just a little over $25,000 a year. So obviously not something you could support a family on. I appreciate the income, and between my retirement and that income, I'll be fine. But again, for a person with a real job, to be able to quit that job to get paid $20,000 a year, that just doesn't work. So it's a really challenging opportunity. Let me give you a sense of just what our council members do. We have council meetings that are 5-6 hours once a week. You think, oh, I could do 5 or 6 hours once a week. That's not a big deal. But you've got to read a packet this thick beforehand. You also serve on one or two of the committees, the Municipal Service Committee, the Finance Committee, the Public Safety Committee. We also, council members are asked, I've been appointed to the Fire and Police Retirement Board, once a month meeting. I am going to be appointed, I serve on the San Gabriel Valley Council of Governments Homelessness Committee, meets once a month. I'm about to be appointed to the Foothill Transit Board, meets once a month. None of those are paid. And then you all want to talk to me, right? And I want to talk to you. This weekend, I knocked on 75 doors to ask people to come out tonight. Some of you may be here tonight because I knocked on your door. That's important to me. I don't want to disappear for 4 years and you not have access. I believe in taking the government to the people instead of waiting for the people to come to the government, because few people have that time. And so it's a lot of hours. It's probably 20 to 30 hours a week to do this job. And again, we could pay $75,000 a year, which would be tripling our salaries. And for a lot of people, they still couldn't afford to do that. So it is a real challenge. We may just end up staying where we are, and I'm fine with that. I knew what the salary was coming in. But I do worry about younger people being able to run and to serve our community in the future and still support their family and pay for their solar bills and their electricity bills. So thank you again, everyone, for coming out, and the panel is available.
Thanks for having us here.